Have you ever looked at a map of the United States and noticed something strange? On one side you have bustling cities, packed highways, and lights that glow from space. But then, you look to the west, and huge swathes of the country seem empty, vast, open, and sparsely populated. We're talking about nearly half the country. The question is, why? Why is half of America so empty? Most people will give you the simple answer: geography. They'll point to the Rocky Mountains, the vast deserts of the Great Basin, and say, well, it's just hard to live there. And they're not wrong. The western US has some of the most rugged and challenging terrain on the continent, but that's only a tiny piece of a much larger, more fascinating puzzle. The real story isn't just about mountains and deserts. It's about water, history, and a deliberate century-long plan that shaped the nation in ways most people never realize. This isn't just a geography lesson. It's the untold story of America's settlement. To truly understand this, we need to hop in a time machine and go back to the 19th century. Picture this. The East Coast is getting crowded. The promise of manifest destiny is in the air, a belief that America was destined to stretch from sea to shining sea. So pioneers started heading west, looking for land, opportunity, and a new life. They followed trails like the Oregon Trail, facing incredible hardships. But when they crossed the 100th meridian, a line of longitude that runs right through the middle of the country, everything changed. The landscape transformed. The tall grasses of the prairies gave way to shorter, sparser vegetation. The reliable rainfall they were used to in the east became unpredictable. This wasn't just a change in scenery. It was a fundamental shift in the environment. A popular saying at the time was, "Rain follows the plow." People genuinely believed that farming the land would magically make it rain more. Spoilers, it didn't work. Many early settlements in this arid region failed, and people learned a tough lesson. You can't build a city where you can't get a drink. This brings us to the single most important factor determining where people live in the American West: water. It's the lifeblood of civilization. You can have the most fertile soil and the most beautiful land, but without a reliable source of water, you have nothing. In the eastern half of the US, water is generally plentiful. Rivers are abundant and rain is relatively consistent. But in the west, it's a different story. Precipitation is scarce, and the major water sources are mighty rivers like the Colorado, the Columbia, and the Missouri, which are fed by snowmelt from the mountains. The settlement of the West wasn't a story of individual farmers dotting the landscape. It was a story of massive government-led engineering projects. The Reclamation Act of 1902 was a game-changer. It funded huge dams, reservoirs, and aqueducts to capture that precious snowmelt and divert it to dry lands, making agriculture and urban development possible. Think about the Hoover Dam. It didn't just provide electricity, it tamed the wild Colorado River and created Lake Mead, which supplies water to Las Vegas, Phoenix, and Los Angeles. Without these colossal water projects, the major cities of the West as we know them today simply wouldn't exist. So people didn't settle randomly. They settled where the water was directed. But here's the other side of that coin, and it's a big one: government land ownership. While the government was busy building dams, it was also holding on to vast amounts of land. If you look at a map of federal land, you'll see that it's almost all in the West. We're talking about huge areas managed by the Bureau of Land Management, the Forest Service, and the National Park Service. In a state like Nevada, the federal government owns over 80% of the land. In Utah, it's about 2/3. Why? Well, part of it was for conservation, protecting stunning natural landscapes like Yellowstone, Yosemite, and the Grand Canyon for future generations. Another part was for resource management, controlling access to timber, grazing lands, and valuable minerals. But the effect was profound. You can't just go and build a new city in the middle of a national forest or a BLM wilderness area. This public ownership created massive, permanent greenbelts and open spaces where large-scale private development is simply not allowed. It locked huge portions of the map in a state of empty, preserving them from urban sprawl. So when you see those big empty-looking spaces on a map of the West, remember you're often looking at a national park, a national forest, or other public lands that are intentionally kept that way. Now let's tie this all together. You have a region with naturally scarce water. Then you have massive government projects that concentrate that water into specific areas, allowing cities like Phoenix and Los Angeles to bloom in the desert. Simultaneously, the government holds onto the majority of the surrounding land, preventing development outside of these designated water-rich corridors. What you end up with is a pattern of islands of development in a sea of open space. People cluster in the valleys and basins where water is available, leaving the vast mountains, deserts and forests in between largely untouched. It wasn't an accident. It was a consequence of policy, engineering and geography all working together. The emptiness isn't a failure of settlement. In many ways, it's a deliberate design. This is also why population density in the West is so spiky. You'll have a massive, sprawling metropolis like Los Angeles, and then you can drive for a couple of hours and be in what feels like the middle of nowhere. It's a landscape of extremes. Today, this legacy presents enormous challenges. The very water projects that allowed the West to grow are now under immense strain from climate change and booming populations. The Colorado River, for example, is shrinking, forcing states to make incredibly difficult decisions about water allocation. The empty spaces are becoming more valuable than ever, not just for recreation and conservation, but as critical watersheds that sustain the cities. So the next time you fly over the United States and gaze down at those vast, unpopulated landscapes, you'll know the real story. It's not just an empty space. It's a complex tapestry woven from the dreams of pioneers, the power of rivers, the ambition of engineers, and the wisdom of conservationists. It's a landscape shaped by a century of choices that determined not just where people could live, but where they couldn't. It's the story of how we engineered the American West, and it's written right there on the map, in the spaces between the cities. Thanks so much for watching. What do you find most surprising about the settlement of the American West? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey through history and geography, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories hidden in plain sight. We'll see you in the next video.